You hear me out there in the back? Thank you. All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Where's Christy? Christy picked a couple videos, and we're going to play one. It's got a lot of F-bombs. If you don't want to hear any F-bombs, go to the restroom for the next 4 minutes. But this video is really for me because I'm crazy focused at work. I can get that stuff done on a timely basis. But when it comes to working out, I start, I stop, I start, I stop. And I've gained 15 pounds during COVID, and I was already 15 pounds overweight. So if I don't stop, I'm going to look like Scott soon, and that's not going to be good for either one of us. I meant that Scott, yeah. And if he thinks that I meant that Scott. So guys, let's play a quick little video, and then we're going to roll here today. We've got a lot of stuff to go through.
The battle is actually in your head. You're not going to hear noises, you're not going to hear gunfire, you're not going to hear any explosions. It's not that kind of battle. What's in your head is weakness and laziness, and they're not attacking, they're sneaking around. They're poisoning the strength in your brain.
You are putting things off because in the short term, it's easier, it's more comfortable, it's more pleasurable to be distracted or to indulge yourself doing something else than it is to sit down and do the actual work to create the outputs that matter when they are needed.
And I know what it's like to tell yourself, I'm gonna start on Monday. And then for the next 5 days, you gorge yourself, or you're extra lazy, or you treat yourself extra much because you know you're gonna do it this time, and this time I'm serious, and this time I'm for real, and I'm gonna get it done. Except you're not, and you know you're not. And if you really want it to change, and if you really want to make a change, and you really want to be different, and you really want it to be this time, start fucking now. I don't care if it's 9 o'clock at night. Do something productive towards what it is you're trying to become. Because I can tell you right now, for sure, that the people who tell themselves, I'm going to start Monday, never fucking start Monday.
All you have to do to kill procrastination is just start. You just go, and procrastination dies. So don't wonder how you overcome procrastination. It's easy. All you do to overcome procrastination is go.
Stop waiting for something to move you and move yourself. Every day, move yourself. In the morning, move yourself. In the afternoon, move yourself. At night, move yourself. Be very intentional and very deliberate about moving yourself. You control your feelings. Don't nobody else control your feelings. So when you tell me I ain't feeling it no more, it don't got nothing to do with something external. It's something internal that you ain't pushing no more. You push you. You gotta move you every single day. If you get to a point in your day and you down and out, if you get to a point in your day and you exhausted, you get to a point in your day and you're not feeling it, you can stop right there and change the mood. Nothing controls you. You control your feelings. You control your mood. Don't nobody control your mood. You saw something that threw you off, well, see something that throw you back on.
The only way to get out of the mental trap is to stop thinking and actually start doing it. Because all the research shows that if we can push you to get started on something, you'll likely keep going.
It's a matter of not making a decision. Little things you're putting off, do it, and do it right now. I know you've got other things, do it. When you make a decision to do something, you flip your brain onto the frequency that you have to be on to do it. You don't have to know how to do it. You only have to know you're going to do it.
I want you to literally just commit that you wake up and every single damn day, you push yourself to take one small action forward. Every day for a fucking week. That's it. Don't think about the bigness of it. Actually start doing it.
There's always going to be a reason to wait. There's always going to be something that is inconvenient for you to work through. There's always going to be a busy schedule. It's always going to be that way. You have to fucking work through it. There's always going to be a reason for you to do what it takes now if you want it bad enough. But a lot of you motherfuckers just don't want it. And unless you're committed 100%, you just aren't going to make it. The processes of success are always inconvenient in the beginning. They don't stay that way. If you stick with it, if you give it time, if you work through the inconveniences, they become habit. They are done with passive effort, passive thought. It's just something automatic. And if you can create automatic actions that are positive in your life, you're gonna create automatic winning.
procrastination. When we go through the 1, 3, 6, Heather, in our mastermind groups, probably procrastination is the number one thing of the 6, right? It comes down to, I'm going to start next week. I'm going to do it. But it's so easy to make up excuses. And that's one of the reasons I encourage people to the 50. Okay.
A boy, a girl, or a man.
I thought we needed 2.
That was 3 people, a boy, a man, and a something. But procrastination, I mean, it's so easy. That's human behavior. It's easy. I'm going to put it off. I'm going to put it off. I'm going to put it off. And then, Jay, we always read that sheet on habits, right? You know, habits can destroy you and they can make you great. And so it just got to do those little things. And the problem is you can do it in one aspect. I'm a living example that in my work business, I'm crazy to make sure that I get things done and I'm disciplined to do it. But in my working out, I do it, I don't. I do it, I don't. And so we need to get in habits in every aspect of our life to make sure we do those things. So I want to work out, but Shannon continually tells me I have other chores to do. She left. She's so mad about salesmen, she's leaving already. Oh, she's coming back? So, you know, create those good habits. We see this all the time when we walk through the 1, 3, 6, right? In our mastermind groups as we do the goal setting. It's easy to make excuses. Put yourself in the right environment, which is why I encourage you to come into the office environment. Studies show that when you're in the right environment that has less excuses, and the office environment, you're not mowing the yard, you're not walking the dog, right? Hopefully you're not taking a nap. Ralph did, but as a general rule, you get rid of a lot of the excuses that get in your way to do the things you need to do. So we're here to help you. Accountability, I guess, as I look at you, honestly, right? When you got a coach and you had someone then holding you accountable, you're paying them, you're like, something goes off your brain. Oh my God, I got to report back to them and I'm paying them, so I should do what they say. And then all of a sudden you create good habits to do things, and what happens? Your business doubled. And so that would be the one suggestion that we talked a lot about in our goal setting when we were going through things at the end of last year is get an accountability partner. Get somebody that daily, and so we do that internally as a management team. Gino has us do that. We switch every month with CEOs around the country where we just get to know them better, but it's also making you think and be cognizant of what are the things I need to do on a daily basis that's going to help me be more productive, that's going to help me be more successful and continue to grow in whatever aspect I'm trying to do. So I would encourage you, grab an accountability partner if you don't have one, and switch them off periodically. Carrie, there you are. Do we have these to hand out? They're handed out. So we've got the top individuals and the top total, which is teams and individuals here for the quarterly numbers. This is probably a little bit less, but the first quarter's been slower than last year, right? Than we typically have at the beginning of the year, but not. Kate, you're saying yes? So again, what we do is for individuals, we just basically take, Carrie, help me on this, 25 closed transactions and $5 million, and we divide that into quarters to make the individual thing. And on the team one, it's 50 transactions and $10 million, and we divide that into quarters. And so if you make it, we rank it for both sales, for sales volume, for units, and for GCI. So you'll see those rankings for each one of those categories on there, guys. So I know that this is important to some of you because I get calls at the beginning of each quarter saying, do you have those numbers? Where do I rank? Who's ahead of me? Blah, blah, blah. So look at those. Scott was talking about it a minute ago. What we have clearly noticed is when you look, especially at that individual sheet, right? Those who have builders are clearly starting out the year substantially better than those that are working just your sphere of influence. Because as we all know, we're working harder, showing zillion houses. And a lot of people that have builders had a lot of business that got booked last year that's overflowed, that's closing at the beginning of this year. So I think at the end of the second quarter, I'm starting to see, just so you guys know, we are seeing the numbers of listings increase tremendously over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Actually, Heather, I think in your numbers yesterday, listings of existing homes is almost doubled in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Is that right?
I would not say no.
I thought it went from 2 something to 5. Wrong? Is your math wrong or is my math wrong?
Well, your math is wrong. I would say
Yeah.
with the no-shows included, we have...
See, Shannon, I got 2 wives.
The numbers are definitely up.
The numbers are up.
Yes.
Okay. So we're seeing them creep up. Internally, we're seeing them creep up, right? Carry it in our thing. And pendings are coming up. And we're hearing, there's exceptions to this rule, as Heather points out to me every time I make this statement. that houses that were getting 25, 30, 45 showings or offers on them now maybe getting 10 to 15, but there's still those exceptions out there that are getting 30, 40 offers on this. So we're hoping that as we continue to get, we're seeing about 4 or 5 different areas that people are starting to feel more comfortable towards getting towards the end of COVID, and that's beginning some more houses in the market. We've had a lot of people that did new construction last year. Their houses are getting ready to get done. We're seeing a part of those people put things back on the market. We're seeing the spring market put things back on the market. And then we also kind of think interest rates moving. Interest rates have went from 2.5% to 3% over the last month or so. You know, and there is some fear that those things could continue to rise. And as prices keep going up, we think just little itty bitty things here and there are all moving the market a little bit. So am I missing anything else? It seems like there's another area that we thought was moving it, but I had Scott run, at the end of last year, Scott ran numbers for the Omaha area, and 28% of the agents sold no houses. We just ran it again last week, and so at the end of last year and the first quarter of this year, 8% of those people decided to get out of the business, being 21%. Sold 0 houses last year out of 3,100, 3,200 agents. 3 or less houses, even after that 8% got out of the business, it's still over 50% of the agents sold 3 or less houses last year. The reason I bring this up to you is this industry has continued to become the have and the have-nots. And I'm going to bring up, why don't Heather, Scott, and Jay please pop up here and sit in a seat, and then we're going to have a little panel on some things. But what we're starting to see is we are seeing more, and we had a mastermind group, right? That was a fairly lively mastermind group last week, talking about more messes. There is more misunderstandings, more uneducated agents out there than I've ever seen before. And we're seeing so many things where it's coming to appraisals, escalation clauses, financing contingency. It's not Brian. Joe, you took all the pressure off of Brian. She said, "To hell with you, I'm leaving and taking this call." We are seeing more mistakes made, threats of people being taken to the real estate commission, threats of lawsuits, sellers more than we've ever seen before saying, "I want to get out of an offer." It's usually a buyer that wants to get out of an offer, but we're seeing sellers saying they want to get out of offers. We're just seeing more craziness than ever before. And I really believe more than anything else, it's coming down to the lack of understanding of things that are going on because we have so many agents doing so few business. They're not setting in mastermind groups. They're not doing enough business to really understand what's going on with escalation clauses and uncapped escalation clauses. We've seen, unfortunately, just in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, someone didn't understand escalation clause and left $20-some thousand on the table that we think more than that. So that's even worse yet, that their seller probably could have got because they weren't understanding that. I've seen that, unfortunately, a couple times. We're seeing, which is why I'm going to have Scott dive in here first, we're seeing people do not understand that the buyer is paying the seller's closing costs. So can you maybe, our first subject that we're seeing a fair amount of confusion on that we want to make sure people get right, can you talk, and Scott, I think it was last Monday, we had you send out another email trying to explain it. In the mastermind group yesterday, people said, "I'm still confused." Remember when they read it, Heather, I think, when they talked about it a little bit. So I said, well, show up to sales meeting tomorrow to talk about this, but talk about the escalation clause and the net effect of that when a buyer is offering to pay that if someone said $310 and someone's got an escalation clause, say, "I'll beat that by $1,000, it's not $311 if they're paying $8,000 of the seller's closing costs. You walk through that and make sure that, and
right.
questions on that, guys.
Right. So of course, this is unprecedented, right? Generally you've seen sellers pay buyers closing costs. Now we've got buyers paying sellers closing costs. And so first and foremost, we updated our escalation form so that you'll see that this week just to make it a little more clear. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the purchase price that matters. It's what the seller nets out that matters. That's what you got to be focused on, right? You got to focus on if either side, right? If I'm the buyer and I'm trying to write an aggressive offer, I want to try to write the most aggressive offer I can with the idea that I've got to net out the most money to the seller. And so you can do that in any kind of combination, right? Between paying cost and paying purchase price. But I think a lot of agents get so caught up in I'm looking for the highest purchase price. Well, that's not necessarily the best offer. And our escalation clause says the best offer, the net out offer to the seller. And so that's what you got to focus on is how do I, when I'm dropping these things down and comparing offers, purchase price is a component of it, but it's not the final say. It's what that seller is going to net out, what is going to make the most money to the seller. And that's going to be the best offer every single time. And so when you're thinking about it, that's what you got to be thinking about. And so, there's been confusion over, sellers paid cost versus buyers paid cost and what that means. But if you think about it, if the buyer is paying some of the seller's costs, that's going to increase net amount to the seller on top of what the purchase price might be. And so when you are trying to compare your offer, you don't have to think about it in the sense of, first and foremost, I think a buyer is going to be very confused.
Are you confused?
I'm confused. I think a buyer is going to be very confused, right? If
when attorneys start talking like this, I'm like, oh shit.
Well, I just think, if you're going to write an escalation clause and you're going to say you're going to beat the next offer by $1,000, I think that's what your buyer expects that you're going to do. Not that you're going to beat it by $1,000 plus $5,000 in closing costs on top of it. You're trying to beat it by $1,000. That's what your buyer's expecting. And so you've got to take those numbers together, purchase price plus any amount that the buyer's paying of the seller's closing costs, and that's going to be the net out number that you're going to compare with other offers, and trying to beat the next highest offer by, whatever you put in that escalation clause by $1,000. So that's what you got to be focused on.
Right, and so here's the problem. This came up probably 3 weeks ago when we started figuring out it was more prominent than we thought it was, where there was an offer, someone said, we'll pay up to $310,000 and we'll beat the highest offer by $1,000, right? And so they come back, the other agent comes back and says, okay, the other offer is $305, you got to pay $306. And so the agent almost did that, and finally a light bulb went off in their head, and they're like, well, time out, we're paying, I think in this case it was $5,000 of the seller's closing costs. So really, 301 plus us paying $5,000 of the seller's closing costs is effectively 306. So the agents and the agent on the other side, the listing side also, both agents were like agents in the business 20 plus years. That's what started making me say, okay, these are agents doing $10 million of business and they're still confused on what's going on here. So if you've got the buyer and someone's sending you back a escalation clause and saying, okay, you've got to pay 306 and you're paying $5,000, you need to say, no, we're going to pay 301. Because that is effectively a net number to the seller. It's actually really even more positive for the seller, because if you're paying $5,000 of the closing costs, that's $5,000 of commission the seller's not paying on doc stamps, and there's actually some other things. We're not netting those numbers into that number, but
right, and the seller doesn't care. I don't care how high the purchase price is. I want to know how much money I'm going to make, right? I want to make more money. I don't want to have a higher purchase price. If you're on the buy side, of course, if you've got the cash available and you're going to have a loan as part of it, it's a lot better to have a lower purchase price than it is to have a higher purchase price when it comes to appraisal purposes too, right? So I mean, the more cash you can bring to the table in seller paid cost is going to work better for you with loans, appraisals, taxes going forward, right? Because they're going to take your purchase price for tax purposes, at least for the next 2-3 years. It makes a lot more sense to me to not win the purchase price battle. It's better to win the net to the seller battle and get the seller more money.
And does everyone understand that by the buyer paying,
got to have cash,
by the
right?
Buyer paying seller's closing costs, that's helping reduce a little bit of the appraisal issue.
But
Now-
with that being said, a lot of these agents that you guys are working with at different companies, especially different companies that aren't seeing this many transactions, don't understand you paying their closing costs. So you have to explain it to them. Explain to them the benefit that the appraisal issue will not affect them, and the fact that their sellers are getting their commissions paid for. Because when we've spoken to a couple agents, they would say they would prefer the escalation clause to go up higher rather than the seller getting their closing costs paid, which obviously they're not understanding the benefit of it. So make sure the agents that you guys are doing deals with understand the whole purpose of this. You got a couple questions?
Yes. Are you sure, Scott? You want Scott to answer this?
Repeat her question too.
So the question would be is, if I'm on the buy side, if I can do a seller net sheet to try to explain your offer better.
You don't know if it's a 3.5% commission or a 7%.
Yeah, part of that is you're going to have to plug in some numbers and try to make some, estimates as to what you think it might roll out to. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's fine with the understanding of, look, I don't know what what your commission is or what you're getting paid on this. So, but I'm trying to show you that this is a better number for these reasons.
So when you're doing that, we're writing. We're stating, you know, if it's $5 or because we're seeing $8,000, $10,000 people paying for seller's closing costs. So write in there closing costs plus commissions. That verbiage needs it because you're not going to get there without commissions. So it needs to be plus commissions to make that number get to the number you want to go to. VA does have limitations. VA, you cannot pay for the commissions. The buyer cannot pay for the seller's commissions, and so there, you know, it's going to be a much lower number.
And on all of your egg deals too.
No, but
You're
it's gonna
basically
be
writing in
similar to
paragraph
like the
10.
seller paying the buyer's closing costs, but be specific because then a title company is going to call you and say, what does this $5,000 or $10,000 supposed to be applied to? So make sure you're spelling it out for them.
So paragraph 10 is where we would put that, right?
Yes. Wait, buyers can't pay for seller's costs if they're VA.
They cannot pay for commission.
They can't pay
Caps out,
commission,
right.
broker flat fee, or escrow closing fee. So there's 3 items that they cannot pay. Yes.
Yes.
Nope.
Rich is the mortgage guy. He's worse than an attorney.
Yeah. They can't do it.
I'll take it.
Yes.
2 questions on Zoom. We have agents in our company who will not even consider an uncapped escalation. We must err on the side of, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the word. We must err on the side of,
Give it a try. Let's hear it.
no, it's like a, we must err on the side of creating this in a separate purchase agreement addendum. It's more of a statement.
So the uncapped portion is put on the multiple offer addendum where it says the top amount that you guys are willing to pay. You put uncapped, see section 10. In section 10, you're going to put subject to buyer's approval of final purchase price. And so that way your buyer's given that last opportunity to have that seller and that seller agent come to you and say, hey, is your buyer willing to pay X amount of dollars for the house? If so, they would put that in their counter saying that, you know, due to multiple offer addendum, the final price to be such and such amount. So
Subject to buyer approving it.
subject to buyer's approval of final purchase price,
Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, honestly, that's how our agents are winning deals right now. I mean, they're getting more of their deals. One, I spoke with an agent this weekend and coached her, and she said the agent in the office had never seen it before, loved it, and they took our offer.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, if you're not considering that, we're seeing that uncapped escalation clauses. One is, I heard a number of agents over the last couple of months saying, I've never done it. And they were complaining to me in the conversation saying, I'm not getting any of my offers accepted. I said, have you talked to your client about paying seller's closing costs? Have you talked about an uncapped escalation clause subject to your buyer approving at the end of the day? The very next offer they wrote with those 2 things in there, they end up getting the offer accepted. If you're a listing agent, though, I think you've got to be open-minded to it, because what we're seeing is, if you go back, the conversation we had in the mastermind group yesterday, which is a conversation I'm getting quite often right now, is the listing agents are coming saying, okay, here's my top offer, and I got 2 or 3 or 4 uncapped escalation clauses. How do I even deal with that? My suggestion is, and then you guys pop in if you have a different suggestion, is go back to the top offer plus all of the uncapped escalation clauses and come back and say, here's the terms and conditions most important to me as a seller, right? This closing date, pay for these closing costs. Probably in those situations, they're typically coming back saying, not subject to appraisal, the buyer has to make up the spread. And then go back to those people, say, you can't give me an uncapped one. What dollar will you pay for this, right? Get the permission from the seller saying, listen, my top number is 310, and I've got 3 uncapped escalation clauses. What's the best number you guys will pay? Here's the things that are important to me. Boom, 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 boom. And then now have everyone bring those back to you. Because the last thing that you got to remember is, which is really helping sellers get more money, is if you get written permission, written being text, email, or some sort of correspondence you can respond back to from the seller. Because we had in a mastermind group yesterday and a couple times, someone saying, I'm kind of asking in a nice way, you know, is my offer going to be okay? Or what price do I need to come to? If your seller gives you permission to tell the other buyers out there, the top 3 or 4, that listen, you know, you're going to have to hit this price or you're going to have to beat this price, you have the permission to do that. And then we're seeing buyers come back and say, okay, up my offer $5,000. Okay, instead of doing $5,000 or $10,000 over the appraisal, we'll do $15,000 or we'll do it uncapped or something like that. So you have, with permission of the seller, to go to buyer's agents and say, Here's the top number we have. You're going to have to beat that. But we are seeing sellers get more money because they're putting into play uncapped escalation clauses almost daily.
Well, and nothing stops you as the list agent from going back to the offer you like most and just go, it's yours for $215. I mean, we had one where they got beat by a mortgage by $1,000. I said, well, you're not tied to that. Go back to the cash buyer and say, raise yours $1,000 and it's yours, and put it together and done. I mean, and it was by far the better deal. Didn't have to worry about the appraisal issue or anything else going into it. And they got the price that they wanted, and all they had to do was get a cash buyer to go $1,000 up over their highest escalation fee, and they were done and over with. So nothing stops you from going back and putting it together either.
One of the reasons I keep hearing that people say, I don't like these escalation clauses, is because then I've got to go show what the other offer was, and their escalation clause to show this. To Scott's point right here, if you've got 4 or 5 offers, we're seeing lots of times they're not taking the highest dollar offer. They're saying, I'm going to take this offer that's cash or 50% down, that's not subject to appraisal. And if appraisal is $20,000 or $30,000 low, we're going to do that, and they're matching my closing date, or they're doing this or that. So, but go back to whatever you like is the best offer and counter it. Don't use the escalation clause. Counter it and say, if you pay, we're going to counter back yours because we like your offer best, but there's some terms and conditions that we like in other offers better. So if you pay this price with this closing date and pay X closing costs and do no inspection, waive the appraisal contingency, we'll accept your offer. That's a counter back. Now you don't even have to show what the other offers were in that point of thing. So I'm hearing lots of agents doing that versus using the escalation clause, because it's hardly ever just price. It's usually other factors in this conversation. Questions or thoughts from anybody out there? Yes.
If appraisal comes in, say $5,000 below the accepted price, are you able after that to put in an addendum to adjust the purchase price and then pay $5,000 of the seller's closing costs?
Make sure you repeat the question.
So you bought a house for $255, comes in the appraisal at $250, and can you write an appraisal to lower it to $250 or addendum to lower it to $250?
And then pay $5,000 of the seller's closing costs.
I think as long as you're in line with the lending timeline, you'd be able to do that for sure.
Right, you could easily do that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything the buyer. So now we're not seeing many 250 houses or 300 houses saying that they're going to accept the offer. If you guys are seeing something different, but the conversations I'm having is most houses under 350, somebody's paying something if it doesn't appraise out above the appraised price. So let's dive into that conversation. Is that we're seeing people say they're writing a cash offer and then they're coming back saying, oh, we're going to go get a loan. Will you switch the financing? Do not do that. If your sellers accept a conditional 50% down or a cash offer and someone now wants to come back and say it's subject to a loan, don't sign that. If the buyer goes and gets a loan and closes per the terms and conditions of the contract, that's cash to the seller at closing. But don't weaken your seller's position saying, oh, now we're going to make it subject to a financing contingency when you've already accepted a term. And same thing, if you're going from conventional to FHA or VA, that would have to be something accepted. So we're hearing, if you're the listing agent, please, you got to understand on both sides who you're protecting here. If you're the listing agent and someone says, I'm going to pay, we'll pay up to $15,000 or $20,000 up to the purchase price if it does not appraise out. If it appraises out $15,000 low, we'll pay that. You need to be getting proof of funds. You need to say, okay, you're going to put $30,000 down, plus you're willing to pay another $15,000. Give me proof of funds of $45,000 to $50,000 if this doesn't appraise out. But we're having tons of people that are coming in saying, okay, I'll pay up to $5,000 or I'll pay up to $10,000. And after losing deal after deal, they're coming back and say, fine, if it doesn't appraise out, we'll pay the spread. And they're doing that. But then they're coming back because not everyone's done their due diligence, and they're saying all of a sudden, oh, sorry, we don't have that extra $15,000. So our conversation has been not having the cash to close when you're paying the spread that you've agreed to in a purchase agreement, because you've already agreed in the purchase agreement. So you've waived your financing contingency, right? If you're saying, I'm going to pay the difference with appraisal, the financing contingency doesn't matter anymore. Is that correct, Scott?
That is correct.
So now all of a sudden, and it comes in $20,000 low, and you only have $10,000 above your down payment, you're still obligated as the buyer to buy that house. You're going to for sure lose your earnest deposit when you get out of that, and you could possibly lose more out of that. The seller has no obligation to let you out of that house. Not having cash, because this is what we've heard from a number of people, not having that cash does not get the buyer out of that house because of the financing contingency. So you need to be verifying. Now, as the buyer's agent, if you know someone's making a statement and an appraisal comes in $20,000 low and they don't have that extra $20,000, that's a material fact that could affect this transaction. You have an obligation to tell the listing agent so they can tell the seller that, hey, if this thing comes in $20,000 low, they only got an extra $10,000. You've got to disclose that to the listing agent as part of that.
Also, make sure if you guys are the buyer's agents that you guys are disclosing if they're doing 5% down, that they have the 5% down. Don't try to make the deal stronger by marking 10% down, thinking that you guys can switch it over. Or two, if you know it's subject to them selling a house, but you know their house is going to sell really fast, you must disclose that also. You know, these are items that people are trying to skip through on these contracts, knowing that their house is going to sell pretty quick in this crazy market. But if you as an agent know this information and are not writing it down in the contracts, it's going to hold you liable. So
Can we dive into this 8.2 and 8.21?
can we skip 8.2 and 8.21?
No, because it's our biggest problem. So we've been telling you guys for years, if you're doing financing, FHA, VA, or conventional 20% down or less, right? 5, 10, 15, 20% down on conventional. There's no reason to put in the purchase agreement subject to home appraising out, because the financing contingency, if filled out properly, automatically says if it does not appraise out, that the buyer can get out of the house. And a lot of listing agents, uneducated agents, don't know that. So they're looking at one offer that's 10% down, saying subject to house appraising out, and another offer that's 10% down that doesn't have that statement. They're like, oh, this one's not subject to it appraising out, doesn't appraise out. The listing agent comes back and says, well, your buyer still's got to buy it. It wasn't subject to it appraising out. It was subject to it appraising out because of the financing contingency paragraph being filled out correctly. That's all great, other than most of you are not filling out the financing contingency paragraph properly right now. So can you dive into not just putting the loan amount, but what you need to do either in paragraph 10 or that little blank line there where it says, or talking about LTV or 10%.
So,
down.
I'd say in most markets, right, if you get a loan denial, you go, okay, fine, you move on. The problem is when these prices keep shooting up and we have escalation, it's going above and beyond. It's going to, you're going to have a list agent push back on that financing letter. It's like, why was it denied? And so the best way to protect a buyer without avoiding trying to put in there must appraise is you got to fill out the loan terms as completely as you can, right? You've got to put in, what it's going to be conventional. You got to put in an interest rate. It's going to be 30 years. You got to put in, and then kind of the thing that we think the most important thing to do is that loan to value. So if you want to make sure it's an 80-20 loan, you want to write in 80% loan to value, because then if it doesn't appraise, a lender can give you a denial letter saying, well, the house doesn't appraise, so I can't give you 80-20 loan to value based off this purchase price. And so therefore, here's your denial letter, and the argument's over. I mean, it's like that. We told you this is the loan we were going to apply for. That is the loan that we applied for, and the lender can't give it to us. Therefore, they've denied our loan based off of that. And so that is why filling out those forms completely is the most important thing to do when you're trying to protect a buyer, when you get into escalation amounts and everything on top of it, and the houses don't appraise. And frankly, buyer's probably not going to have the cash to close that gap anyhow. So you've got to protect your buyer in that situation from something bad happening where they go, well, we don't care. You can still get conventional financing because you just wrote conventional financing in there. So bring more cash to the, up your down payment and you're good. And my buyer doesn't have extra money to bring to the table. That's not my problem. That's not what you wrote.
So here's the problem. $300,000, because this is simple math. $300,000 house, your buyer's saying, I'm putting 10% down. So you write in the financing contingency in 8.21, $270,000 loan, right? Subject to them obtaining financing in the amount of $270,000 loan. If you buy it for $300,000, that's great, but that's not the world we're living in. The vast majority of these houses are now having a house listed for $300,000 is having an escalation clause up to $325,000, $330,000, right? So now all of a sudden, if you got an escalation clause you wrote starting at $300,000 up to $325,000, and you settle on a price of $320,000, you still wrote in there subject to a $270,000 loan. And most people are not putting the words right where it says or, they're not putting 10% down or 90% LTV, loan to value. You've got to put in paragraph 10 or in that financing paragraph, which is where I prefer you put it, that 10% down, the words 10% down or 90% loan to value. Because if you buy it for $320,000 and it appraises at anything above 300,000, they're still going to get a $270,000 loan. right? Because it was subject to them getting a $270,000 loan, not subject to them getting a 90% loan to value loan, because $30,000 down on $300,000 is 10%, but 10% down on $320,000 is only $32,000 down. So if you've wrote in there the 10% down or the 90% loan to value, now you've protected yourself, and it's not subject to getting a $270,000 conventional loan. It's subject to them getting a 90% conventional loan. Is that correct, Scott?
That is correct. And please, just check the 8.2 box. Just check it. Just check 8.2 and 8.21. Just please. It just takes care of an argument that everyone has, which, well, okay, that means it's not, this is the loan they're applying for, but it's not contingent on the financing. You got to read it together. And so it's a contingency financing, but just half a second, just a quick little click, and you're good.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
And one of the things with financing is I need to prove that I've got my down payment to get this loan on this particular house. So they start looking at my assets, and I need to have that money in the bank and see it in 60 days. So if I don't have enough money to close the gap, they're not going to approve that 270 on this house because they're not going to show that I have the money.
But all they've got to prove is you got $30,000, not that you have $50,000 because it's sold for $320.
Well, they're not going to give me they're not going to sit there at the table and close the loan for 270 if I don't have the 50. They're going to deny it because they're going to.
Right. But that's more of a bad faith buyers breaching the terms of the contract. Buyer represented that they had the money, but they didn't.
But that's true. So then you can go after the buyer. But the
Right.
buyer is not going to approve the loan. They're still not going to give me 270 if I can't prove my buyer.
Right, but that's not current to this market, right? That's always been an issue where buyers throw the money away, they gamble it away 2 weeks before. So that nothing's changed with that. Right.
So the problem is, to Scott's point, the buyer, you got a denial letter, but the buyer's still in breach. Buyer's still in
Right.
breach of the contract, and they're going to lose their earnest deposit and be liable for damages.
Yeah, depending on how far the seller wants to push it, right?
The simple answer though is put 10%. Right, but the simple answer is put 10% down or 90% loan to value, and now you've got yourself covered.
So just never write an amount in there, you're saying?
Well, I'm okay if you're writing $270,000 as long as you say, because that's based on the $300,000. But as long as you write right next to where it says or, and then it says blank. Write the words 10% down or 90% loan to value. 15% down. Yeah. So it says FH. There's this box. It's FHA, VA, conventional. I don't know what order. And this says or. And where it says or, right in that line right there, 90% LTV, 85% LTV, 80% LTV, and that'll.
Or drop it down to paragraph 10.
We'll resend the email. His Monday email last week talked about this.
Ryan?
It works. So basically, as a buyer's agent, you want to fill out that dollar amount, but as a listing agent, you would rather than put the 10% or 90%.
No,
because that actually
backwards.
protects
No.
as a listing
As the
agent.
buyer's agent, you're not protecting your buyer. The listing agent is in better. The seller's in better shape. As the buyer's agent, to protect your buyer, you want to make sure that you're putting 10% down or LTV. Otherwise, you're screwing your buyer if that house goes up and does not.
Ryan, what you really want to do is just take a cash offer.
Okay.
Okay.
But you're protecting if you're protecting your seller better, you'd want to make sure it's filled out 10% or
Wrong.
90%.
Not necessarily, because the buyer would still be
the total
required
opposite
to
of that.
close.
The seller's protected if the buyer's
Because
agent.
then you're forcing them to go up with the
Right.
restoration
You're
costs.
telling them they have to bring more cash.
Correct.
No.
Which they may or not have.
Right.
So no. You're protected if you don't write as the buyer's agent 10% down, and that house sells for $320, and now it appraises for $310, and there's a $10 shortfall. That buyer can still get. It was only conditional them getting a $270,000 loan based on a $300,000 purchase price. Now there's a $10,000 shortfall. So to protect the buyer, you want to make sure that they're saying this is only subject to us getting on $320,000, $32,000 down, not $40,000 down. So you're protecting the buyer by putting the 10% down or the 90% LTV. The seller's agent and the seller would prefer you not to put that in there because you're going to be able to go back to the buyer saying you've breached the contract. You're still obligated and you're going to lose your earnest deposit. So you're protecting the buyer by putting that verbiage in there.
So, yeah, I mean, if you're on the list side, right, the less they put in, the
better.
more open it is for the seller to go back and say, well, you breached the terms of the contract. You said you could buy it, and you couldn't.
Right.
Which doesn't make it sell, but
You can't make the same argument twice.
No, in protecting the seller though, because there's a lot of newer agents who aren't going to think this, so I'm going to say what really happens. So that would be the case. And now you go, ooh, you've breached the contract. But my seller's screwed now because my seller has depended on this money to go buy another house. So I don't think we should be, ooh, gotcha. We should all be like meeting of the minds when we're writing this contract. So the buyer's like, wait, I didn't know. And that agent who is teaching during the day, waiting tables at night and writing contracts.
All the more reason on the list side, right, to verify funds. Let's see what you have.
Right, exactly.
That's the reason.
So,
That's the reason. That's the reason.
gotcha
The listing
screws
agent be saying, okay, if it appraises out 10 or 20,000 low, do you have 40 or 50,000? Yeah. There has never been a time for us to communicate with more clarity than right now, because with paying sellers closing costs, with these appraisal issues, there's more issues than ever. So here's the other thing on appraisals, okay? We're having, and this is where sellers are getting mad and want to get out of offers right now. Buyers are saying, we'll pay up to $10,000. If it does not appraise out, we'll pay a spread of up to $10,000 up to the purchase price. House sells at $450, appraisal comes in at $400. The sellers accepted those terms. We're going to pay, if it doesn't appraise out, appraised at $400,000, the buyer's going to, sellers accept the terms that the buyer will pay $10,000 over the appraised price. The buyer's now buying the house for $410,000. The seller's saying, time out. I never thought this thing would appraise $50,000 low. I'm not selling my house for $410,000. The seller is selling their house for $410,000 if you as a listing agent wasn't smart enough to put a floor in there. So my opinion is to protect, if someone says, if you're going to accept an offer that says they're going to pay $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 over the appraised price if it does not appraise out, the listing agent and the seller needs to counter back and say, okay, we're accepting $450,000. You're going to pay $10,000 over the appraised price if it does not appraise. But in the event it appraises under $425,000, because if it appraises at $425,000, you're going to give me $425,000 plus $10,000. We're going to at least get $435,000. I can live with that as a seller. But if it appraises under $425,000, either party, and we got verbiage we can send out on this, buyer and or seller can void the contract or renegotiate the contract. But you want to put a floor in for that seller because we're seeing things come in 40, 50. We've had now deals come in $100,000 low on appraisals. This is the world we're living in. So you've got to put that floor in. The exact opposite of this applies also. Then I'm letting you, I see you out of the corner of my eye, Scott. The exact opposite side, if you're on the buyer side, if a buyer's going to say, because we're seeing buyers are writing, we'll pay $5,000, we'll pay $10,000. They're not getting offers. They're saying, forget it. If it doesn't appraise out, we'll pay the spread. If a buyer says we're going to pay the spread and it comes in $40,000 low, and they never assumed that was going to happen, they don't have the cash, that buyer's got a problem because now all of a sudden they're going to have to come up with the extra $30,000, $40,000 to get that thing because they've agreed in the purchase agreement to pay the difference. So if you're on the buyer side, I say, what can you live with? Do you have an extra 10, 15, 20,000 you can live with? Put that in there as your cap that you're going to pay if it doesn't appraise out. If you're on the seller side, put a floor in there. Does that make sense to everybody? Because we're seeing buyers come back and say, oh my God, they don't have the spread. What are they going to do? They never imagined it could appraise that low. I'm like, they need to go borrow the money or they're going to lose their deposit at minimum. And then we're seeing sellers saying, wait, time out, I want to get out of this offer. I never intended on selling the house for this price. I never thought it would appraise this low. And their agent did not put a floor on there. So we're seeing both sides, people getting pissed off right now because we've not put the right thing in there as an agent. So this is really important to do on both sides of this. Go ahead.
Well, here's the other thing is sellers are still getting offers after they accepted yours, right? And there can be better offers than they currently have. And so seller has every incentive in the world to try to get out of it. And so it becomes really incumbent on a buyer's agent to make sure that you get your contract filled out properly. It's too late when Tom Knox gets back to you and says, hey, you forgot to do this, this, and this. I mean, you need to have that on the front end because if you try to go back, if you've not done something that creates that your contract is void, or you didn't get it signed, or you didn't get a countersign, or something like that, and the seller gets a better offer in the interim, they're going to use that to get out and say, nope, we're done. We're going to go sell it to somebody else because you didn't do this right. And so it's really important to get that stuff signed, filled out, and done properly. Because by the time Tom writes you an email, it's too late. And if you got a seller who's motivated to get out of your contract, you're giving them what they need to get out of that contract.
Here's one of the things that I really like. Adam and I gave a speech to a group in Michigan, a buddy of mine, Steve Face's group, about 3-4 weeks ago. And one of the things he's having everyone on his team do, he says, there's so many agents, I have no clue who they are anymore, right? We got agents coming here like popcorn. And so he's doing a video saying, hey, this is Adam Briley. I'm going to be writing an offer on your house. And anything that he thinks could be misunderstood, we're going to be doing an uncapped escalation clause and paying $2,000 over the top one, meaning that whatever the top escalation clause you have is, we'll pay $2,000 over that, subject to the buyer's approval of that. If you have any questions on that, please call me. We're going to be paying $8,000 of the seller's closing costs. Again, we're not asking the seller to pay, but the buyer will pay $8,000 of the seller's closing costs to help reduce any appraisal issue we have on that. You know, we'll pay $10,000 over, you know, in the top offer, something like that. So he's doing a video to them with clarity, saying, here's the things that may be different from normal contracts. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Because the problem is when 25, 35, 40 offers come in, the listing agent's not talking to every single thing, and they're sometimes misconstruing things. So again, you cannot be over communicating right now that message. Yes.
So I had a buyer that was using more of like a commercial 20% down type, loosey-goose type product, adjustable rate, all that. And I knew that, and so I wrote in a separate addendum that, you know, all the appraisal verbiage and whatnot, because I knew that they were likely going to do just an in-house evaluation, not an actual third-party appraisal. And so we had everything covered, but I wanted to make sure that that was necessary, needed, because I think even if I would have put the LTV in there, and I didn't see any other appraisal verbiage that actually would make sure that it was a full second party or third party verification appraisal, not just an in-house air quotes appraisal, because it wasn't a secondary market loan product. Is that right? I got to use the addendum. There's nothing that would protect against that.
I agree with you. I would do the addendum as well. And this is like one of our top agents had said in one of the masterminds the other day, you can never over clarify. So if you want to make sure that you're protecting your seller in this case, absolutely do it in a separate addendum, clarifying the terms that you guys are willing to accept.
There's technically not a requirement of appraisal.
Right.
It's just the assumption under a retail loan product that there's going to be one.
Right.
But then when you start switching gears into the commercial.
I'm a fan, and if you disagree, tell me. I'm a fan of putting, if you're going to pay 5, 10, or uncapped above an appraised, if it doesn't appraise out, I would like to see that on an addendum, saying this is meant to be part of the purchase agreement. Send it at the same time in the same loop to the client versus it on the purchase agreement where the appraiser's seeing that on the purchase agreement, because it becomes easy if someone says doesn't appraise out. Well, the appraiser doesn't care if it appraises out $40,000, $50,000 low. They're like, it's no big deal. I think it makes more sense mentally to have that on an addendum separately. We're going to pay $15,000 over any shortfall, up to $15,000 over any shortfall in appraisal, versus putting that in the purchase agreement. Now that an appraiser's saying they're looking at that.
In the new escalation clause, there's actually going to be a blank in there that you can fill in additional terms now too. So that might be a good spot to slide that in.
How about we talk about inspections for informational purposes
Please,
only?
why don't you go?
Okay, so inspections for informational purposes only. If you're writing this in for your
Heather
buyer.
wanted her time.
No, I didn't, but I don't want to have to
you
help
know,
bail
Jay's
you guys
like,
out
shit,
either.
I'm happy just sitting here.
I'm like, I'm cool with this. If you're
Jay, thoughts?
Who invited me and why am I here?
He's still on vacation. If you're writing inspections for informational purposes, please write in there that the buyer reserves the right to cancel this contract with earnest deposit returned to them, or that they have the option of checking option A or B in that inspection resolution addendum, because if you're just putting inspections for informational purposes only, it's still that you're taking that house.
Yes.
We have one agent that will write in her contract, if she's representing the seller, this is not a contingency of the contract. So yes, you guys can do your inspections for informational purposes only, but you're not getting out because of this.
And don't tell us any defects.
Right. Yeah. This is just simple ways to protect your people right now, to make sure they're getting their earnest deposits back. There's a lot of emotions. People are really crabby. People are, you guys are writing 15 offers for one buyer. So make sure you're doing it right so you can keep those buyers and not make them upset if something happens in the process.
I had a listing in Council Bluffs, got multiple offers on it, $350,000 listing. And what I done is the top 2 offers I took in front of Darryl Wyckoff, and because it had some unique language that I didn't totally understand, because things are changing so much. So I wanted to look at every one of those contracts as though there was a lawyer behind it for the other side. So I took it to Darryl, and Darryl did an excellent job pointing out the differences in what that language meant. And I felt a lot better about it when I got out of there, because there could be something that I have missed with everything changing. And I know that Heather did an excellent job for my wife Sherry on another contract to make sure we haven't missed anything. So my point is that I know both of them are very busy,
but they were nice enough to
Your
take
point
the
is
time.
stress them out more so they stress me out more. I see how the hell this shit works.
If you don't understand the terms
No
of the
gray hair
contract,
till I married Shannon and this COVID thing started.
if you don't understand it, though, like Ron says, reach out to one of us. If you don't understand escalation clauses, if you don't understand some terms of a contract, we are all here for you. So reach out, and we can get into your loop and take a look at your paperwork and make sure you guys understand what you guys
It's
are
better
doing.
to ask than to make a mistake.
Yes,
And, you
it
know,
is.
Daryl mentioned overtime pay, but anything other than that.
Wait a second. He gets overtime pay?
He's a manager. He doesn't get that, but they think he does, so that's okay. So, guys, it is really the wild, wild west. There's really more uneducated agents because the problem we have is the myth in the market right now is everybody hears, oh my God, real estate's selling crazy fast. Real estate's selling for more. Real estate's hot, 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 hot. So people are like, well, let's get into real estate. We're going to sell lots of houses. The problem is I believe this is the toughest market I've ever seen because it's not easy for the real estate agent because you're competing against 20, 30 other offers all the time. You're working more trying to figure out how to find houses for your buyers and so forth. And there's a crazy shortage of listings. So I think this is a harder time for agents. So that takes us into a point that Jay, you can pop in here. In mastermind groups, we've been talking about, we've been talking about, you know, how do we overcome discount brokers? Because we're having lots of agents, show of hands of who individually or on a team has lost to a 3.5 or 4% listing, that you've not got the listing because, right? So we're hearing that pretty regularly right now, that there's lots of discounting going on there, and people are saying, well, I don't need you to list my house. So you want to walk through, you guys, what we're hearing in mastermind group, some things that you would say to a for sale by owner, or some things that you would say to a discount broker as to why they should list with us.
Well, I guess some of the notes that I had for the for sale by owner was 80% of the time they're actually involving another agent in that transaction.
91.2% of the time.
91.2. I'll change my
Speak
stat.
with certainty whether you know it or not.
Can't let anyone
okay?
just talk, can he?
Yeah. Well, his number changes every time we have a mastermind.
And,
so
and it's always believable because I never say 80 or 90. I say 87.3% of the time. You know, sellers pay a commission.
But anyways, one of the great lines is, you know, do you want to pay someone else working against you? And when they're already paying out that 2.42, there's not much more that you have to do to make up that difference. And so when you're setting up the appointment, I mean, one of the great questions is who's going to be setting up your appointments, handling appraisal issues, inspections. And then those are questions you want to ask, but you don't want to answer for them. You want that to be something that they have to think about. So then you can start adding value on different things, especially with appraisal issues. I know that's a big thing. Drew Halverson brings that up all the time, that I'm in this business every single day helping. I know the appraisals. I can do appraisal packets. I can do lots of things to help overcome that. So when we do get over list price, that we can try to put this together, get the most money for you. And we've had it on mastermind groups too, that we've had people that had family members, things like that decided to do for sale by owner themselves, and then actually regretted it because they were only maybe able to produce one offer, where you can go and tell us for sale by owner that, hey, you're probably going to get your house sold. That's not the problem. But are you going to get it sold for the most amount of money? We're going to be able to generate the interest and activity to get you possibly 10, 15, 20 different offers, depending on you know, what we list at. And I think that's been one of the big problems too. I think some people are letting the sellers dictate too much on what the list price should be, where you need to educate them that if you do a little bit more towards market value, that'll automatically, organically then get the higher prices, as opposed to reaching for the stars. And then that's the house that sits on the market for 3 or 4 days that buyers can come in later on, that we educate buyers and say, hey, let's wait 3 or 4 days, see which ones are still on the market, and then go make those offers. We hear that all the time in the masterminds, where those are the ones that they can get in and actually get at market or a little bit below, or get pricing off of that.
So 2 things he said. 87.4% of the time, for sale by owner, and the truth is it is between 80 and 90%, as I'm poking fun at Jay. The vast majority of the time, the for sale by owner actually does pay another agent that's brought the buyer the 2.4 or 2.5%. So when you're trying to convince someone not to go for sale by owner, don't talk about making up the difference between 5 or 6%. All you should be talking about is making up the difference between 2.5 to 3.5%, because they're already paying out 2.5% to that agent that is competing against them, right? They're giving money to an agent to work against them. There's nobody there representing their interests. But the other part of that is we saw a survey 5 weeks ago that said 41% of people, depression, anxiety, high levels of stress, 60% lonely. One came out even since then that now says 47% of people, and these actually Gina has documents. I can show you these numbers are real. 47% of people, depression, high anxiety. The point is, we've got agents that don't know how to deal with buyer paying seller's closing costs, how to protect their seller on escalation clauses and work escalation clauses, and how to protect them on the appraisals. So Jay's point there is ask them all these questions. Who's going to set up all these appointments? What are you going to do to protect yourself if it doesn't appraise out? Because a lot of these houses aren't appraising out right now. What are you going to do to deal with inspections? Understanding human behaviors, lots of people are stressed out. The real estate transaction is one of the most highly emotional transactions there is out there. Asking those questions and then getting back with them, and we're having a lot of people, then when they get back to them the next day, they're like, you're right, we don't want to deal with all of that. So people will pay us to reduce their stress, make a simple, easy, stress-free transaction. And don't focus on 5 or 6%, focus on the part that the extra part they're going to pay, the 2.5 to 3.5%. Anything you want to add to that? No. Okay. One last thing is a lot of the people doing discounting are the part-time agent doing next to no business. So we do more transactions per agent than any other brokerage. We have the highest average sales price in the market than any other brokerage. So you guys are more productive, and those, especially of you in the room, are more productive than the vast majority of agents. So one of the things that we heard in one of the mastermind groups I like is if someone's talking about, well, I've got an agent that's going to do it for 3.5%, 4%. It's like, you need to say, really, how much time are they going to spend on that, right? If that's how little they value themselves. And two is, here's how many transactions I did in the last 6 months, or I've done in the last year. How many transactions have they done? How skilled are they on being able to protect you on these appraisal issues, on these inspection issues, on all these type of things? You've got to be at the top of your head. You've got to have a statement that's going to make them understand the value that you have and how you're going to make this an easier, simple, stress-free transaction for them. Go ahead.
I have one
You look
question.
like you want to talk.
I do, but I don't know that I want to say it right now because
Great.
we haven't really spoken about it. We did speak about it yesterday in a mastermind, and I've had a couple agents ask me about this, so I would like to see Scott's take on it, even though from what I heard it's wrong. Anyways, if you are showing a house,
That'd be a first.
I know, right? If you're showing a house
Today.
to a client today, can I bring a inspector with me without the permission of the seller or the seller's agent? Because I'm hearing a lot of agents that are trying to sneak
Can we turn off the Zoom?
I'm just asking because I don't want you guys to put yourself in a liability position. So I
guess the question would be
no.
is what's the liability? I mean, I don't know what the liability is in bringing an inspector with you to go through the house.
Having a hired party look at the house without the approval of the sellers or the seller's agent.
How many times do people bring
so
dad
maybe-
through it with the dad who's a contractor and home inspector? I mean, to me, it's a very low risk at the end of the day, and I don't even know what the risk is.
If
I guess you
climbing
could
in
say,
the
I
attic
guess,
or looking at roofs or something of that nature.
yeah, jumping up on the roof's a different story to me than
Okay.
rocking through the house with somebody else to look
going
at
up
it.
in an attic, going on a roof is different than walking through the house with them. To the point, Mamie's point is, it's my friend, it's my. No, it's my dad, right?
Knocking around the mechanicals and doing that kind of stuff, I think is outside of the bounds. But having a person who's knowledgeable about houses walking through it, to me, is not a thing that shouldn't be allowed or would be a liability issue.
If
Brian,
you're
tell your
paying
wife
them
you'll
to
call
go
her
through
back.
that house with you.
Well, I pay people to do things all the time,
Well,
and I
that
don't tell
doesn't-
anyone.
that's not what we're talking
Right,
about.
right. Yeah,
today.
we're talking about real estate, Scott.
Oh, okay.
For sure, turn off the Zoom now.
Is that Zoom still off?
This is the
you
reason
know-
when things are said wrong, we make sure we have legal counsel right
And this
next
might
to
be
us.
something that we've got to look further into.
I'm sorry.
but
At the
it
end of
is
the day,
coming up.
I don't think it's a big deal. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
We'll find out when someone gets sued.
Yeah, but I don't know what there'd be no damage though. You got to have damage. What's the damage? I mean, to me, there's a difference between a buyer wanting to hire someone to go through it with them and assuming they're not, trespassing, going on the roof, being in areas that they shouldn't be, them casually walking around and giving a visual inspection with the buyer is not that big of a deal to me.
So you're the caveat I'm hearing is really kind of in between. You don't see anything wrong with
I'm a lawyer. I'm going to find that middle.
You don't see anything wrong with somebody going with them as long as they're not going up into the attic, they're not going on the roof, they're not ripping things apart.
Right. That'd be my opinion.
Guys, we're out of time. Okay. We've been Jay, don't leave yet. We're not done. Jay will be coming up here next. We've got a 10-minute motivational speech coming up. And I'm not offering $100 for a motivational speech anymore to get someone up and have you guys do jumping jacks.
I just want 10 minutes of Jay stories.
And I think I'd have given $200, didn't I, on that doggone thing? If you've got questions, please get a hold of us. BT is not dead. He's back in the house, Brian Thomas. But he's wearing a mask because he must not want to die. He came from Florida. He doesn't know what the laws are in Nebraska. Did it? Please get a hold of us. It is crazy out there. Talk through things with us. But guys, continue to work. Create good habits. Start getting back in the office. I love seeing so many people here. Let's have a great day. Anything you guys want to wrap up with? All right.
I will say you can't lie about it. If a list agent said, "Who are you bringing with you?" you can't not disclose it. I mean, that would be outside of the bounds, clearly.
That is an attorney
violation.
covering his ass right now, just so you know.
I had to get it in the last minute.
Guys, thank you. I appreciate you.